What if the greatest secrets of the ancient world weren't locked away in treasure vaults or buried beneath pyramids, but hidden in plain sight, disguised as myths, symbols, and the cryptic writings of alchemists? For centuries, these masters of transformation claimed to hold knowledge so profound, so revolutionary, that it could unlock the very fabric of reality. Yet today, their true wisdom lies fragmented, scattered across time like ashes from a forgotten fire. But here's the twist: what if those fragments still hold power? Alchemy wasn't just about turning lead into gold. That was merely the surface, a coded language pointing to something far grander. The alchemists of old were scientists, yes, but also philosophers and mystics, weaving together the threads of chemistry, spirituality, and the cosmos itself. Their laboratories weren't just workshops, they were temples of transformation, where the secrets of matter, mind, and even immortality were pursued with relentless curiosity. Yet so much of their knowledge has been dismissed as superstition, lost to war, persecution, or the slow erosion of time. But today we're pulling back the veil. Imagine holding a map to forgotten truths, 25 pieces of lost wisdom, each one a key to understanding how these ancient seekers saw the world. Some of these secrets might challenge what you think you know about history, science, even human potential. Others might feel eerily familiar, as if the alchemists were whispering across the ages, waiting for someone to listen. This isn't just a journey into the past, it's an excavation of ideas that could still reshape our future, so ready to uncover what they never wanted us to find. The Philosopher's Stone, no symbol of alchemy, burns brighter in the imagination. For centuries, it was the ultimate prize, the holy grail of transformation, promising powers beyond mere wealth or longevity. But was it real, or just a metaphor, a riddle wrapped in the gold-leafed pages of ancient texts? Let's peel back the layers. At its core, the stone was said to do two impossible things: turn base metals into gold and grant eternal life. But here's where it gets fascinating. To the alchemists, these weren't just literal ambitions. The transmutation of lead into gold symbolized something deeper: the elevation of the human soul from ignorance to enlightenment. And immortality, not just living forever, but transcending the limitations of the physical world entirely. Take Nicolas Flamel, the legendary French scribe turned alchemist. History remembers him as a humble bookseller, but legends claim he and his wife, Perronelle, discovered the stone's secrets in the late 1400s. How? By deciphering a cryptic manuscript filled with arcane symbols, a book so potent it supposedly revealed the formula for the stone itself. Stories say they used its power to amass wealth, fund charities, and even cheat death until they staged their own funerals and vanished, leaving behind empty graves. Skeptics dismiss it as folklore, but Flamel's meticulous records and sudden riches keep the mystery alive. Then there's the other side of the stone, the practical. Alchemists like Paracelsus and Hermes Trismegistus didn't just write about it, they left behind recipes. Strange ingredients like the red lion, green dragon, or philosophical mercury appear in their texts. Were these code words for chemical processes? Some modern researchers think so. The red lion might have been iron oxide, while the green dragon could have been sulfuric acid components in early metallurgy. Even the famed Emerald Tablet, a cornerstone of alchemical thought, hints at a tangible method, as above, so below. A clue, perhaps, that the stone wasn't just a physical object, but a mirror of cosmic laws waiting to be unlocked. So where does that leave us? Buried somewhere between myth and laboratory notes, the Philosopher's Stone remains alchemy's greatest paradox, a quest that might have been about science, spirituality, or both. And while we may never hold it in our hands, its legacy endures, because whether literal or symbolic, the stone challenges us to ask, what if transformation isn't just about changing metals but ourselves? If the Philosopher's Stone was the ultimate prize, the elixir of life was its twin, the liquid counterpart, promising not just transformation, but eternity itself. Across continents and centuries, alchemists chased this elusive brew, convinced that nature held the key to cheating death. And while Western traditions often dominate the lore, the real story begins far earlier in the courts of ancient China, where emperors and sages mixed mercury, jade, and even powdered pearls in their relentless pursuit of immortality. Chinese alchemy, known as Weidan external alchemy and Nidan internal alchemy, wasn't just about potions. It was a fusion of medicine, mysticism, and metallurgy. Emperors like Qin Shi Huang, the first ruler of a unified China, consumed concoctions laced with cinnabar, a toxic mercury compound, believing it would purify their bodies and grant eternal life. Spoiler, it didn't, but their experiments weren't in vain. These early alchemists accidentally pioneered early chemistry, discovering alloys, dyes, and even gunpowder while searching for the elixir. One text, the Bayapuzi, even details a recipe involving gold, mushrooms, and the mythical rejuvenating dew collected from jade vessels at mountaintops. Meanwhile, halfway across the world, European alchemists were stirring their own cauldrons. Medieval texts like the Rosarium Philosophorum described the elixir as a crimson liquid distilled from the blood of the green lion, likely a coded reference to plant extracts or mineral compounds. Some recipes called for solar essence, gold dissolved in acid, or lunar tears, silver solutions, while others spoke of a universal solvent capable of dissolving all matter, a substance eerily similar to what we now know as nitric acid. But here's the fascinating parallel. Both East and West shared a startling belief. The elixir wasn't just a drink, it was a mirror of the cosmos. Chinese alchemists spoke of balancing yin and yang in the body, while European masters like Paracelsus argued that the elixir worked by harmonizing the three primes of salt, sulfur, and mercury within the human frame. In other words, immortality wasn't just about chemistry, it was about alignment, a perfect equilibrium between the physical and the divine. So were they onto something? Modern science laughs at the idea of a literal life-extending potion, but researchers today study substances like resveratrol, found in red wine, and rapamycin, a soil bacterium derivative, for their anti-aging properties. Even cryonics, freezing bodies for future revival, echoes the alchemist's dream of conquering death. Perhaps the elixir was never a single recipe, but a metaphor for humanity's timeless hunger to transcend limits. And in that sense, the quest never really ended, it just evolved. The idea of turning lead into gold seems like pure fantasy today, a magician's trick or a child's dream. But to the alchemists, it was far more than a get-rich-quick scheme. It was a profound metaphor for the hidden potential within all matter, and perhaps within ourselves. Let's break down the science behind their obsession. At its core, transmutation isn't impossible, it just requires conditions far beyond medieval laboratories. Modern physics confirms that elements can change, but only through nuclear reactions, like those inside stars or particle accelerators. Lead and gold differ by just 3 protons, but rearranging atoms demands energies alchemists couldn't fathom. So were they completely wrong? Not exactly. Their experiments laid the groundwork for modern chemistry. When alchemists heated metals with mysterious powders or acids, they were unknowingly exploring concepts like atomic bonding and phase transitions. Take the famed black stage of the alchemical process, a point where materials broke down into a dark, chaotic mass. Today, we recognize this as oxidation or decomposition, steps crucial to understanding how matter transforms. Even their symbolic language hinted at truths they couldn't yet articulate. The marriage of the sun and moon, often depicted in texts, mirrored the interplay of active and reactive substances, a poetic precursor to chemical affinities. Yet the deeper genius of transmutation lay in its duality. Alchemists like Zosimos of Panopolis wrote of turning the coarse into the refined, framing lead to gold as an allegory for spiritual growth. In this light, lead represented the heavy, unawakened human soul, while gold symbolized enlightenment. The famed Emerald Tablet's maxim, "That which is below is like that which is above," suggests they saw the laboratory and the cosmos as mirrors. Every flask and furnace wasn't just a tool, it was a microcosm of universal laws. Perhaps the most striking proof of their intuition lies in modern alchemy. Well, sort of. In 1941, scientists at Harvard actually transmuted mercury into gold using a nuclear reactor, proving the concept physically possible. Yet the energy and cost involved made it utterly impractical. Ironically, this mirrors alchemical warnings about the stone's true purpose, not wealth but wisdom. The real treasure wasn't in creating gold, it was in uncovering the principles that govern change itself. So next time you dismiss transmutation as mere folly, remember those old masters were chasing a truth far richer than any metal. The Emerald Tablet, a single slab of green stone, said to contain the entire secret of alchemy in just a few enigmatic lines. Attributed to the mythical Hermes Trismegistus, this cryptic text has haunted scholars and seekers for over 1,000 years. At its heart lies the most famous alchemical phrase ever written, "As above, so below." 7 words that launched 1,000 interpretations, a key that might unlock not just the mysteries of matter, but the very structure of reality. But what did it truly mean? And why did everyone from medieval monks to Isaac Newton obsess over its riddles? Let's start with the tablet itself. Unlike sprawling manuscripts, the Emerald Tablet is startlingly brief, just 13 or 14 lines in most translations. Yet each one crackles with layered meaning. Take the opening, "True without falsehood, certain, most certain." This wasn't just a boast, alchemists saw it as a warning. The secrets here were absolute but required purity of intention to grasp. Then comes the crown jewel, "As above, so below, as below, so above." On one level, it's a cosmic blueprint, a declaration that the patterns of the heavens mirror those on Earth. The movement of planets might correlate with the growth of plants, the phases of the moon with cycles of human life. Medieval Arab alchemists like Jabir ibn Hayyan took this literally, mapping planetary metals, gold for the sun, silver for the moon, to laboratory processes. But there's a deeper, more unsettling layer. The phrase also suggests that human consciousness and the universe are intertwined, that by transforming the self, you could alter reality itself. This idea electrified Renaissance thinkers. The physician Paracelsus carried a copy of the tablet everywhere, convinced its principles could revolutionize medicine. To him, above represented the divine spark in humans, while below was the physical body. Healing then meant aligning both. Meanwhile, in Islamic alchemy, the tablet's words fueled experiments in distillation and crystallization, literal attempts to manifest celestial harmony in flasks and beakers. Newton's obsession with the tablet reveals another twist. Yes, that Newton, the father of gravity. He translated the Emerald Tablet in secret, filling notebooks with alchemical symbols. Why? Because he suspected it hid the laws of attraction governing not just metals but planets. His groundbreaking work on universal gravitation might owe more to Hermes than we realize. Modern physicists even find eerie echoes in concepts like quantum entanglement, where particles instantaneously influence each other across vast distances, a literal, "as above, so below" at the subatomic level. The tablet's influence didn't stop at labs or lecture halls. Its maxim bled into art, architecture, and even politics. Gothic cathedrals, with their vaulted ceilings mirroring celestial spheres, embodied the principle. Secret societies like the Rosicrucians wove it into initiation rites, and today, you'll spot its legacy in everything from Jungian psychology, the idea of the microcosm reflecting the macrocosm, to holistic medicine. So was the Emerald Tablet a chemical recipe, a spiritual manifesto, or both? perhaps its genius lies in refusing that very distinction. By insisting the universe is a vast, interconnected puzzle, it challenged seekers to look beyond categories, to see the lab and the soul as one. And that's why, centuries later, its green gleam still tempts us, not because it offers easy answers, but because it whispers that the greatest secrets might be hiding in the spaces between what we think we know. To the untrained eye, alchemical manuscripts look like chaos, a jumble of cryptic drawings, strange animals, and celestial bodies scrawled across aged parchment. But these weren't random doodles, they were a sophisticated visual language, a code designed to protect sacred knowledge from the uninitiated and the authorities who might destroy it. Take the Ouroboros, that serpent swallowing its own tail. On the surface, it's a simple circle, yet to alchemists, it symbolized the eternal cycle of destruction and rebirth, the very essence of their work. Every time they dissolved a substance with acid or purified it by fire, they were mirroring the Ouroboros, breaking down matter to build it anew. The symbol whispered a truth modern science now confirms: energy is never lost, only transformed. Then there's the dance of the sun and moon, gold and silver, often depicted as a king and queen embracing. This wasn't just romantic imagery. These symbols represented the fundamental duality of existence: active and passive, masculine and feminine, sulfur and mercury. In laboratory terms, the sun gold stood for the fixed, unyielding aspects of matter, while the moon silver symbolized volatility and change. Combine them and you achieved the chemical wedding, a fusion of opposites that alchemists believed could birth the Philosopher's Stone. The 16th century text Rosarium Philosophorum even shows the royal couple drowning in a flask, a startling metaphor for dissolution, the necessary death before rebirth. Animal symbols added another layer of secrecy. The raven, often shown blackening in flames, represented the negrido stage of putrefaction, where matter decayed into primordial chaos. The phoenix rising from ashes signaled the rubido, the final glorious transformation into gold. Even colors held meaning. The green lion devouring the sun wasn't a fantasy creature but a vivid description of hydrochloric acid dissolving gold, turning the solution emerald green. These images weren't just poetic, they were precise, hiding recipes in plain sight from those who lacked the key. But why such elaborate subterfuge, persecution? Alchemists faced threats from church and crown alike. Too bold a claim like crafting gold could mean charges of heresy or fraud. Symbols became their shield. When the Spanish alchemist Ramon Llull wrote of the Red Dragon, he wasn't describing a monster but likely cinnabar, a mercury sulfide used in transmutation. Even the zodiac crept into their diagrams, linking metals to planetary influences, iron to Mars, copper to Venus. To outsiders, it looked like astrology. To initiates, it was a precise map of catalytic properties. The brilliance of this symbolic language lies in its universality. A 10th century Persian alchemist and a 17th century German adept could understand each other's work without sharing a spoken word. The symbols transcended language barriers, creating a clandestine fraternity across time and space. Today, we've inherited fragments of this visual code, the caduceus in medicine, the hexagrams in chemistry. But the deeper lesson remains. Sometimes the most profound truths aren't shouted. They're whispered in symbols, waiting for those patient enough to decipher them. To the alchemists, the stars weren't just distant lights, they were the invisible hands shaping every transformation in their flasks. The notion that celestial bodies influenced earthly matter might sound like mysticism today, but in their world it was as fundamental as gravity. Metals didn't just behave randomly, they resonated with the planets. Gold pulsed with the sun's energy, silver shimmered under the moon's sway, and iron carried the militant force of Mars. This wasn't poetic fancy, it was a working theory, a framework that guided centuries of experimentation. Paracelsus, the rebellious Swiss polymath, took this idea further than most. He didn't just link metals to planets, he prescribed medicines based on astrological charts. In his mind, the body was a microcosm of the universe, its ailments tied to cosmic imbalances. A patient suffering from saturnine melancholy might be treated with lead compounds, not despite their toxicity, but because Saturn governed both lead and the spleen, the organ thought to harbor black bile. Crazy, perhaps, but consider this. Modern chronobiology confirms that lunar cycles affect human sleep patterns, and solar activity influences magnetic fields. The alchemists may have garbled the mechanisms, but their core insight that celestial and terrestrial realms interact wasn't entirely off track. The zodiac, too, played a practical role. Alchemical texts often timed operations to specific signs. Distilling a tincture under Taurus, the earthy sign supposedly stabilized volatile substances. Aries, ruled by fire, was ideal for calcination, the process of reducing matter to ash. These weren't arbitrary rules. The 15th century Liber Mutus depicts an alchemist's lab with zodiacal symbols etched into glassware, a visual manual for harnessing astral energies. Even the famed Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, found its laboratory expression here. Align your work with the heavens and the reaction would follow. But the real twist lies in how these ideas bridged art and science. When an alchemist drew Mercury's caduceus beside a flask of quicksilver, they weren't just decorating. They were documenting a belief that Mercury, the metal, shared qualities with Mercury, the planet, fluidity, adaptability, a mediator between extremes. This symbolic shorthand allowed them to communicate complex chemical relationships long before the periodic table. So why does this matter now? Because it reveals alchemy's true genius, its ability to weave observation, intuition, and symbolism into a cohesive system. Were they wrong about planetary influences in the literal sense? Yes. But in their quest to map the hidden connections of the cosmos, they stumbled onto something profound: the idea that everything, from a grain of salt to a distant star, might be part of an intricate, interlocking dance. And isn't that what science at its best still seeks to uncover? Long before modern pharmacies lined city streets, alchemists were the original apothecaries, mixing metals, minerals, and mystical herbs into medicines that walked the razor's edge between poison and cure. Among them, one name towers above the rest: Ibn Sina, the Persian polymath whose canon of medicine became the medical Bible of the medieval world. But here's what most histories overlook: his genius was rooted in alchemy. When he prescribed mercury for skin diseases or sulfur for infections, he wasn't just following tradition. He was applying alchemical principles to the human body, viewing illness as an imbalance of elemental forces waiting to be corrected. Take his treatment for leprosy, a terrifying scourge of the era. Ibn Sina's remedy combined roasted copper, powdered pearls, and rose oil, a blend that sounds bizarre until you unravel the alchemical logic. Copper, associated with Venus, was believed to carry anti-putrefactive properties. Pearls, formed in the depths, symbolized purity rising from corruption. Modern science confirms copper's antimicrobial effects, while calcium carbonate in pearls does promote skin healing. This wasn't blind guesswork, it was proto-chemistry disguised as mysticism. Even his use of opium for pain relief followed alchemical principles. Extract the essence, morphine, from the crude matter poppy sap to isolate its hidden virtue. The real alchemical revolution, though, lay in distillation. Persian and Arab alchemists like Jabir ibn Hayyan perfected the alembic, a coiled apparatus that could separate liquids by boiling points. Suddenly, they could isolate potent essential oils from plants or purify alcohol as a solvent, techniques still foundational in pharmacology today. Their aqua vitae, distilled alcohol, wasn't just a party drink. It was a universal medium for tinctures, preserving active compounds that would otherwise decay. When European monks later distilled quintessences, hyper-concentrated herbal extracts, they were walking paths paved by alchemists centuries prior. But the darkest twist: Alchemy's legacy in toxicology. Paracelsus, the 16th century iconoclast, famously declared, "The dose makes the poison." He dosed patients with arsenic, mercury, and antimony, believing correctly that tiny amounts could stimulate healing, a concept now known as hormesis. His laudanum, an opium tincture, became the most widely used painkiller until the 19th century. Yet his methods were pure alchemy, transforming deadly substances into medicines through precise calculation, just as one might purify lead into gold. So why did these breakthroughs fade? Blame the rise of scientific medicine, which dismissed alchemy as superstition, throwing out the baby with the bathwater. Modern researchers are now rediscovering what Ibn Sina knew, that the line between poison and cure is thinner than we think. Chemotherapy drugs derived from mustard gas, digitalis, a heart medication, comes from the deadly foxglove plant. The alchemists' greatest lesson wasn't in their recipes, but in their perspective. That healing often lies in mastering the art of transformation, turning the toxic into the therapeutic, one careful transmutation at a time. For all its lofty ideals, alchemy had a shadowed underbelly, one where laboratory fires flickered alongside candles lit for far darker purposes. While many alchemists sought enlightenment through chemistry, others strayed into realms that blurred the line between experimentation and the occult. Take the infamous Picatrix, a grimoire so potent it was said to fuse astrology, demonology, and alchemy into a single terrifying art. Translated from Arabic in 13th century Spain, this text wasn't just about transforming metals. It detailed how to construct talismans under specific planetary alignments, infusing them with the spirits of celestial forces. Some recipes called for bizarre ingredients: blood, hair, even substances harvested under the new moon, steps that crossed boldly into necromantic territory. Then there's the curious case of Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa, the Renaissance wizard whose 3 books of occult philosophy became the Bible of esoteric alchemy. Agrippa insisted that true mastery required commanding invisible forces, not just chemical reactions. He described rituals to summon elemental beings, arguing that metals grew in the earth like living things, each with its own spirit an alchemist could commune with. To modern eyes, this seems like superstition, but Agrippa's peers took it deadly seriously. When rumors spread that he'd bound a demon to help him transmute metals, authorities hounded him across Europe, forcing him into exile. The darkest tales swirl around figures like John Dee, Queen Elizabeth I's court astrologer. By day, he mapped the heavens. By night, he conducted scrying sessions using a black mirror and a self-proclaimed medium named Edward Kelly. Their goal: to contact angels who supposedly revealed alchemical secrets in an unknown language called Enochian. Dee's meticulous journals describe eerie dialogues with these entities, who promised the Philosopher's Stone's formula for a price. Kelly later claimed an angel demanded they share wives, a scandal that shattered Dee's reputation. Whether deception, madness, or something more unsettling, the episode exposes how easily the alchemist's quest for hidden knowledge could spiral into obsession. But why this overlap between lab work and the occult? Context is key. In an age when science and magic weren't yet divorced, manipulating matter seemed inherently mystical. Distilling a plant into its essence felt akin to capturing its soul. Mercury's liquid metal form evoked living silver. Even the symbols overlapped. The Ouroboros snake appeared in both alchemical texts and necromantic rites as a sign of eternal cycles. For some, the occult wasn't a departure from alchemy, it was the next logical step. The legacy of these forbidden practices lingers. Modern chemists might scoff, but the Picatrix's planetary magic echoes in surprising places. Early pharmacology classified medicines by astrological signs. Even today, some homeopaths time remedies to moon phases, and that line between genius and heresy. It's thinner than we think. The same inquisitors who burned alchemists for summoning spirits later praised their medicinal discoveries. Perhaps the real dark side wasn't the occult itself, but humanity's endless hunger to bend the unknown to its will, a temptation as dangerous and as seductive as any elixir. History remembers alchemy as a brotherhood of bearded sages, but hidden in the margins of ancient texts lie names that defy this stereotype, women who shaped the art at its very roots. Maria the Jewess, a shadowy figure from 3rd century Alexandria, wasn't just a practitioner, she was an innovator whose inventions still bear her name. Take the bain-marie, or Mary's bath, a gentle heating method she devised to prevent volatile substances from exploding. Modern kitchens use it for delicate sauces, but Maria's original purpose was far more ambitious, distilling mercury without shattering glassware, a breakthrough that allowed alchemists to work with this elusive metal safely. Her other creations, like the kerotakis, a sealed vessel for exposing materials to vapors, became prototypes for later chemical apparatus. Yet scrolls from her era rarely credit her directly. Her legacy survives through whispered references in the works of male successors like Zosimos, who called her the first of all alchemists while burying her techniques under layers of symbolism. Then there's Cleopatra the alchemist, no relation to the Egyptian queen, but every bit as formidable. Her Chrysopoeia manuscript, a single surviving page adorned with a serpent eating its tail, the Ouroboros, contains cryptic formulas for creating divine water, likely an early acid solution capable of dissolving gold. What's startling isn't just her technical prowess, but her boldness. In one passage, she scolds fellow alchemists for hoarding knowledge, insisting true mastery required sharing wisdom, a radical stance in an era when secrets meant power. Her work even hints at proto-feminist themes, comparing the alchemical process to childbirth, with the flask as a womb nurturing new forms of matter. The erasure of these women wasn't accidental. Medieval copyists often corrected texts attributed to women by reassigning them to male authors. Taputi Belate Kalam, a Babylonian perfume maker and chemist from 1200 BCE, appears in cuneiform tablets as a royal overseer of distillation, yet later Greek accounts demote her to a mere perfumer's daughter. Similarly, the 12th century German abbess Hildegard von Bingen wrote extensively on medicinal alchemy, extracting tinctures from plants and minerals, but church historians later framed her as a mystic, downplaying her laboratory work. Why does this matter? Because their contributions weren't marginal, they were foundational. Maria's bain-marie enabled precise temperature control, a principle now vital in pharmaceuticals. Cleopatra's insistence on transparency foreshadowed the scientific method. These women didn't just participate in alchemy, they pushed it forward, only to have their names scratched from the record. Yet their ideas refused to die, seeping into the very fabric of chemistry. Perhaps the ultimate transmutation wasn't turning lead into gold, but turning their stolen genius into tools we still use today, tools that quietly whisper their true origins to those who listen. The Nile's annual floods left more than fertile soil, they birthed an entire philosophy. In the rich black silt the Egyptians called chem, early alchemists saw the primal matter from which all things could emerge and return. This wasn't just dirt, it was the heartbeat of transformation, the literal and symbolic foundation of a tradition that would span millennia. While Greece later coined the term alchemy, its soul belonged to Egypt, where metallurgists and priests worked side by side, turning ore into art and rituals into chemical knowledge. At the center stood Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, often depicted with a scribe's palette, a fitting symbol for a deity credited with inventing both writing and the sacred science of transmutation. Ancient texts describe him revealing the secrets of metals to humanity, teaching how to purify gold not just for crowns but for ceremonial objects meant to bridge earth and the divine. The famed Emerald Tablet, later attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, the Greek name for Thoth, likely has roots in these early Egyptian teachings. But here's what's easily overlooked. The goldsmiths of Memphis and Thebes weren't just craftsmen. Their workshops doubled as temples where every hammer strike and furnace blast carried spiritual weight. Melting ore wasn't just a physical act, It mirrored the sun god Ra's journey through the underworld, death and rebirth enacted in molten metal. The practical innovations were staggering. Egyptian chemists mastered alloying, creating electrum, a gold-silver blend for temple ornaments. They developed acids from fermented natron to refine precious metals, and their glass-making techniques, achieving vibrant blues and reds by adding cobalt and copper, remained unmatched for centuries. Yet every technique was cloaked in ritual. Before firing a kiln, artisans might recite spells to invoke Ptah, the god of creation. Recipes for pigments often included incantations alongside measurements, because to the Egyptian mind, a substance's potency depended as much on its spiritual essence as its chemical properties. This fusion of lab and liturgy reached its peak in the Book of the Dead. Among its spells lies a startling passage, a recipe for crafting a golden amulet, complete with instructions for purification and the exact words to speak as the metal cooled. The parallel to later alchemical texts is uncanny, like the difference between a prayer book and a lab manual blurred into one. Even mummification, that iconic Egyptian practice, was alchemy in action. The preservatives used natron, resins, even traces of mercury weren't chosen randomly. They were the fruits of centuries observing how substances interacted, how salt could dry and conserve, how certain gums hardened into eternal shells. Why does this matter today? Because Egypt's legacy reframes what alchemy truly was. Not proto-chemistry or mysticism alone, but a third path, a discipline where altering matter was inseparable from understanding the cosmos. When Napoleon's archaeologists uncovered an ancient Egyptian laboratory in 1799, they found crucibles alongside statues of Thoth, a silent testament to a time when science and the sacred weren't rivals, but partners in the greatest transformation of all, unraveling the mysteries of existence itself. While Western alchemists toiled over furnaces and flasks, their Chinese counterparts were pursuing an entirely different path, one that turned inward, merging chemistry with the rhythms of breath and meditation. This was Neden, or inner alchemy, a practice deeply entwined with Taoist philosophy. Where European texts spoke of crucibles and metals, Chinese scrolls like the Canton Kai, often called the triplex unity, mapped the human body as the true laboratory, with meridians as vessels and vital essences as reagents. The goal wasn't just to create gold, but to refine the very substance of life itself. At the heart of this tradition lay the concept of wu-wei, effortless action. Taoist alchemists believed that just as water carves stone without force, the body's energies could be transformed through gentle, persistent cultivation. The Canton Kai, attributed to the legendary Wei Boyang in the 2nd century, framed this process in cosmic terms. Yin and yang weren't just opposites, they were dynamic partners, dancing in the body like mercury and sulfur in an alchemist's flask. Breath control, visualization, and even dietary practices became tools to balance these forces, circulating Kai vital energy through the elixir fields of the abdomen and heart. One striking passage describes the firing times, a schedule mirroring the moon's phases, where practitioners harnessed celestial rhythms to stoke their inner furnace. The contrast with Western alchemy couldn't be sharper. European alchemists sought to dominate matter through fire and acid. Taoists worked with surrender, seeing the body as a microcosm of the universe. Where Paracelsus ingested mercury to prove his mastery over poison, Chinese adepts like Ji Hong warned against external elixirs, insisting that true immortality came from harmonizing the three treasures: Jing essence, Kai energy, and Shen spirit. His Baopuzi text devotes entire chapters to debunking literal interpretations of gold-making, urging disciples to seek the gold within the indestructible clarity of an awakened mind. Yet for all its spiritual focus, Neden wasn't divorced from practical science. The same adepts who meditated on inner landscapes also pioneered early gunpowder experiments, mineral-based medicines, and metallurgical alloys. The Canton Kai's diagrams of energy flow eerily prefigure modern understandings of the nervous system's bioelectricity. And when Taoist texts speak of the golden flower, a symbol of spiritual enlightenment, they describe it with the precision of a laboratory manual. A luminous core formed through the marriage of fire and water, ascending the spine like vapor in a distillation coil. Perhaps the most profound lesson of Chinese alchemy lies in its refusal to separate matter and spirit. To transmute lead into gold was a metaphor for turning base desires into wisdom. To refine cinnabar in a crucible mirrored the purification of consciousness. In a world obsessed with either rigid materialism or escapist mysticism, the Taoist alchemists offered a third way, one where the breath of the body and the breath of the cosmos were, and always had been, the same. India's alchemical tradition didn't just seek to transform metals, it sought to transform life itself. Known as Rasayana, this ancient science wove together mercury, sulfur, and mysticism into a quest for immortality that rivaled the elixirs of China and Europe. But where Western alchemists toiled over furnaces and Taoists turned inward, Indian masters like Nagarjuna took a third path, one where chemistry, medicine, and spirituality fused into a single, radiant discipline. At its heart lay a startling proposition that the human body, like metal, could be purified, perfected, and made incorruptible. Mercury occupied a throne in this tradition. Not the toxic liquid metal we know today, but Parada, the living silver believed to carry the essence of Shiva himself. Rasayana texts describe elaborate processes to kill mercury, purifying it through hundreds of cycles of grinding, heating, and combining with herbs until it became basma, an ash-like substance safe for ingestion. The Rasaratna Samakaya, a 9th century text, details recipes where mercury, sulfur, and mica were fused into glowing red pills said to rejuvenate tissues and arrest aging. Modern labs have confirmed something astonishing. These methods likely converted mercury into non-toxic compounds like mercuric sulfide, a stable mineral still used in Ayurveda today. But Rasayana wasn't just about mercury. It was part of a grander system. Ayurveda, the science of life. Charoka, the famed physician, wrote of Soma Rasayana, a preparation of rare Himalayan herbs and metals that could restore youth. The Charoka Samhita describes patience gaining the luster of gold and strength like iron after treatments. This wasn't metaphor. Archaeologists have found Mughal-era flasks containing gold nanoparticles suspended in herbal decoctions, an early form of nanomedicine designed to enhance bioavailability. The alchemist's dream of imbibing gold's immortality wasn't superstition. It was proto-scientific reasoning. If gold resisted corrosion, perhaps its essence could make the body similarly impervious to decay. The most fascinating twist, Rasayana's spiritual dimension. Unlike Western alchemy's lone genius in a lab, Indian practice tied transformation to ethical living. The Sarvadarshana Sangraha insists that mercury would only awaken for those who practiced truthfulness, charity, and self-discipline. Recipes often began with fasting and mantra recitation, aligning the alchemist's inner state with the outer work. In this light, Rasayana wasn't just chemistry, it was karma made tangible, a belief that purity of intention shaped material outcomes. Today, the legacy of Indian alchemy hides in plain sight. Walk into an Ayurvedic pharmacy and you'll find Swarna Basma gold ash for immunity or Abroka Basma mica calcinate for lung health, direct descendants of Rasayana's metallurgy. Modern studies even validate some claims. Gold nanoparticles show anti-inflammatory properties, while processed mercury compounds exhibit surprising bioavailability. The alchemists' real triumph wasn't conquering death, but this. They built a bridge between the periodic table and the soul, proving that sometimes the most potent transformations happen when science and spirit share the same crucible. While Europe still slumbered through its so-called Dark Ages, the Islamic world was quietly birthing a scientific revolution. and at its beating heart stood alchemy, not as mere mysticism, but as rigorous experimental science. No figure embodies this golden age more than Jabir ibn Hayyan, the 8th century Persian polymath whose workshops in Kufa hummed with the sounds of bubbling alembics and the hiss of newly discovered acids. Historians often paint alchemy as the misguided ancestor of chemistry, but Jabir's notebooks tell a different story, one where meticulous observation and repeatable experiments took center stage. His greatest breakthrough, mastering the art of distillation, a technique so foundational that modern chemists still use variations of his coiled alembic apparatus to purify everything from perfume to petroleum. Jabir's genius lay in his systematic approach. Where earlier alchemists relied on cryptic symbols, he documented procedures with startling precision, detailing how to produce hydrochloric acid by mixing salt and vitriol, or nitric acid by distilling saltpeter with alum. These weren't just theoretical musings, they were recipes for transforming matter itself. His Kitab Alchemia, the Book of Chemistry, didn't just describe reactions, it classified substances into 3 categories: spirits, volatile liquids like alcohol, metals, and stones, a framework that eerily anticipates modern chemical groupings. Even his theory of balances, the idea that metals formed from precise mixtures of sulfur and mercury, while incorrect, pushed science toward the concept of elemental composition. But here's where the myth of alchemy as pseudoscience crumbles. Jabir insisted that theories must be tested, writing, "The first essential in chemistry is that you should perform practical work and conduct experiments." He developed lab tools like the bain-marie, adapted from Maria the Jewess to control heat, and his methods for purifying gold through aqua regia, a mix of nitric and hydrochloric acids, remain standard practice in refining today. His discoveries weren't accidents, they were the fruits of a mind trained in medicine, astronomy, and Aristotelian logic, yet unafraid to challenge ancient dogma. When he wrote that metals could be transmuted, he wasn't spinning fairy tales, he was observing real chemical changes, like the way copper turned golden when alloyed with zinc, a process now known to create brass. The irony, many of Jabir's texts reached Europe via Latin translations, where scholars stripped away their experimental rigor, reducing them to mystical riddles. By the time the Renaissance rolled around, his name had morphed into Jabir, a semi-legendary figure shrouded in alchemical mystery, yet his legacy endured in plain sight. Every time a chemist titrates a solution or distills a compound, they're walking a path Jabir paved over 1,000 years ago. The real philosopher's stone wasn't a magical rock, it was the scientific method, and Jabir ibn Hayyan, more than most, helped forge it. Among the alchemist's most tantalizing dreams was the alchemist, a mythical solvent rumored to dissolve every substance it touched, reducing rubies to liquid and iron to mist with equal ease. Unlike the philosopher's stone, which promised creation, the alchemist represented the ultimate deconstructive force, stripping matter back to its primal essence. The very idea teetered between brilliance and terror, a liquid that could unravel the fabric of reality itself. But here's the twist, this wasn't just a recipe for destruction. To the alchemists, dissolution was the first step toward rebirth, a necessary unraveling before true transformation could begin. The concept first crystallized in the writings of Paracelsus, the iconoclast who defied medieval medicine. He called it the menstruum of the wise, a vivid metaphor comparing the solvent to the cosmic womb that both breaks down and regenerates. His descriptions were tantalizingly vague, a clear, fiery liquid that could open metals, releasing their hidden virtues. Later, the Flemish alchemist Jan Baptist van Helmont expanded the idea, coining the term alchemist and claiming it could reduce any material to its first matter, the primordial stuff before form took shape. His notes describe a substance so potent that glass vessels couldn't contain it. Only eggshells, themselves symbols of potential, could hold it without corroding. But what was the alchemist really? Some theories point to early encounters with potent acids. Nitric acid, discovered by Islamic alchemists, dissolved gold, a feat that seemed miraculous at the time. Others speculate it might have been a primitive form of aqua regia, the volatile blend of nitric and hydrochloric acids that could dismantle even the most stubborn metals. Yet the alchemist's true power lay in its symbolism. Just as the philosopher's stone represented perfection, the alchemist embodied the alchemist's core belief: to build anew, you must first reduce to chaos. This duality shines in their experiments. When an alchemist dissolved a metal in acid, they didn't see mere corrosion. They witnessed the metal's death, a necessary step before it could be resurrected in purified form. The solve et coagula maxim, dissolve and coagulate, wasn't just a lab technique, it was a cosmic principle. The alchemist, then, was the ultimate tool for solve, breaking down illusions to reveal hidden truths. Modern science offers eerie echoes. Nuclear fission splits atoms to release energy, while quantum physics suggests that at the smallest scales, matter blurs into potential. Even our digestive system mirrors the alchemist's function, breaking complex foods into basic components the body can rebuild. The alchemists may have been wrong about a literal universal solvent, but their intuition, that understanding requires deconstruction, was oddly prescient. After all, isn't science itself a kind of alchemist, dissolving old beliefs to make way for new knowledge? Paracelsus, the Renaissance maverick who dosed patients with mercury and named zinc after its jagged crystals, once proposed something even more shocking: a step-by-step guide to creating life in a flask. His 16th century manuscript De Natura Rerum details the recipe for a homunculus, a tiny, fully formed human grown not in a womb but in an alchemist's laboratory. At first glance, it reads like grotesque fantasy. Seal human semen in a sealed vessel with horse manure, let it ferment for 40 days, then nourish the resulting creature with drops of blood. Yet buried beneath the bizarre instructions lies a startling insight, an uncanny anticipation of modern embryology's deepest questions. What makes the homunculus more than just a macabre footnote is its context. Paracelsus wasn't working in a vacuum. He was wrestling with Aristotle's theory of epigenesis, the idea that life unfolds gradually from unformed material. His flask-born creature challenged this, suggesting life could be induced under controlled conditions. The manure's warmth mimicked the body's heat, the sealed vessel replicated the womb's isolation. Even the blood-feeding ritual echoes contemporary understanding of placental nourishment. Was it literal? Probably not. But as metaphor, it was revolutionary, a claim that life's spark wasn't mystical, but replicable through precise environmental manipulation. The ethical shadows here are impossible to ignore. Paracelsus described the homunculus as possessing intelligence but no soul, a distinction that would later haunt debates over artificial life. Jesuit scholars accused him of playing God, while Enlightenment thinkers secretly replicated his experiments, some even substituting rainwater for semen, hoping to trigger spontaneous generation. By the 18th century, the homunculus had slithered into political cartoons as a symbol of humanity's dangerous hubris, a warning against unchecked experimentation. Yet the most haunting legacy of Paracelsus's experiment lies in how eerily it prefigures real science. Modern stem cell research, where induced pluripotent cells are rewired to form new tissues, mirrors the alchemist's dream of directing life's raw materials. In vitro fertilization, with embryos nurtured in glass incubators, fulfills his vision of extrauterine gestation. Even synthetic biology's quest to engineer life from non-living components feels like a distant cousin of the homunculus project. The difference, of course, is precision. Where Paracelsus saw manure as a heat source, we use calibrated incubators. But the fundamental question remains: if life can be made, what then defines its sanctity? Perhaps the homunculus endures not as a failed experiment, but as a mirror. In its glass vessel, we glimpse our own ambitions, fears, and the unresolved dilemma that has followed us from alchemy labs to gene-editing CRISPR tools. Just because we can create life, does it mean we should? Paracelsus never answered that. 4 centuries later, neither have we. Moses striking the rock to bring forth water might sound like a simple miracle, but to medieval alchemists, it was a coded recipe for the prima materia, the primordial substance at the heart of all transmutation. Biblical figures weren't just prophets or kings to these scholars. They were master adepts, their stories layered with alchemical symbolism waiting to be decoded. Take Solomon's temple, described in meticulous detail in the Book of Kings. The structure's gold-plated walls, bronze pillars, and inner sanctum weren't just architectural choices, they were a symbolic laboratory. The Ark of the Covenant, shrouded in darkness, to alchemists like the 13th century Ramon Llull, it represented the sealed vessel where base metals died and transformed, just as the divine presence dwelled unseen within the Ark. Even the tabernacle's construction reads like an alchemical manual when viewed through this lens. The altar's acacia wood overlaid with bronze mirrors the process of calcination, burning away impurities to reveal metal's true nature. The menorah's 7 branches, a metaphor for the 7 planetary metals: gold for the sun, silver for the moon refined through spiritual fire, and when Exodus describes the Spirit of God moving over the waters in creation, alchemists saw the precursor to their own universal solvent, the chaotic matrix from which all matter arose. The parallels don't stop there. The serpent Moses lifted in the wilderness was reinterpreted as the Ouroboros, the serpent eating its tail, a symbol of cyclical transformation central to alchemical thought. The most provocative link lies in the story of the golden calf. While the Bible condemns it as idolatry, some alchemical texts frame it differently. The calf wasn't just a false god, it was an imperfect attempt at transmutation. Aaron's crude alloy of gold and base metals, a flawed echo of the Philosopher's stone. This wasn't heresy to alchemists, it was a cautionary tale about premature revelation, a warning against sharing sacred secrets before their time. Christian mystics like Jacob Boehme took this further, weaving alchemy into the very fabric of salvation. Christ's resurrection became the ultimate transmutation, the lead of mortal flesh reborn as the gold of divine glory. The Eucharist, with its bread and wine transforming into sacred flesh and blood, mirrored the alchemical wedding of sun and moon metals. Even the Passion's imagery, the crown of thorns as a distorted philosopher's crown, the vinegar offered to Christ as a failed elixir, resonated with laboratory symbolism. Yet the boldest claims surrounded the book of Genesis's first verses. Let there be light wasn't just divine command, it was the flash of ignition in the alchemist's flask, the moment chaotic matter began its journey toward order. The separation of waters above and below, a blueprint for distillation where vapors rise and condense into purity. By the Renaissance, scholars like Heinrich Kunrath were sketching the universe as God's alembic, with heaven and earth as the apparatus of cosmic refinement. So were these interpretations hidden truths or creative overreach, perhaps both? The alchemist's genius lay in seeing patterns where others saw only scripture, a reminder that the search for meaning, whether in a flask or a holy text, is itself a kind of sacred science. And in that light, the Bible's greatest alchemical secret might be this: that revelation and experimentation were never truly separate paths, but 2 sides of the same golden coin. The Rosicrucians emerged from the shadows of 17th century Europe like a cipher, waiting to be decoded, a secret society so enigmatic that historians still debate whether they truly existed or were merely an elaborate thought experiment. Their manifestos, the Forma Fraternitatis and Confessio Fraternitatis, read like alchemical texts themselves, veiling their message in layers of symbolism and grandiose claims. They spoke of an invisible college of adepts preserving ancient wisdom, of vaults hidden beneath Germany filled with alchemical secrets, and of a coming age when this knowledge would illuminate the world. But who were they really, and how much of their lore was fact versus philosophical fantasy? At the heart of the Rosicrucian mystery lies Christian Rosencreuz, the mythical founder said to have traveled to Damascus, and Fez, absorbing the arcane sciences of the East before returning to Europe to establish his order. His tomb, allegedly discovered centuries later, was described as a miniature alchemical universe, its walls inscribed with sacred geometry, its ceiling adorned with celestial maps, and at its center a perpetual lamp burning with an undying flame. The imagery here is unmistakable, the tomb as a metaphor for the alchemical vessel, the lamp symbolizing the eternal light of wisdom. Yet no physical evidence of Rosencreuz or his burial site has ever been found, leading scholars to speculate that he was a literary device, a personification of the Rosicrucian ideal rather than a flesh and blood figure. The manifestos themselves are masterpieces of esoteric intrigue. Published anonymously between 1614 and 1615, they called for a universal reformation of science, religion, and politics, fueled by alchemical and hermetic principles. The former tantalizingly describes a vault containing exotic artifacts, mirrors that could capture celestial influences, bells crafted from mystical alloys, and most provocatively, a book titled Book M, rumored to hold the keys to all alchemical transformations. To the initiated, these weren't just treasures, they were coded references to laboratory tools and processes. The mirrors might represent distillation apparatus reflecting purified substances, while the bells could symbolize sealed vessels where metals underwent transmutation. What set the Rosicrucians apart from other secret societies was their fusion of mysticism and nascent scientific thinking. They embraced Paracelsus's medical alchemy, championed the Copernican heliocentric model, and advocated for free education, all radical ideas for their time. Their influence rippled through the Enlightenment, inspiring figures like Robert Fludd, who merged Kabbalah with chemistry, and Elias Ashmole, whose collections seeded the Ashmolean Museum's alchemical archives. Even Isaac Newton, in his private writings, pondered Rosicrucian diagrams linking the 7 metals to the 7 planets, seeing in them a blueprint for cosmic harmony. Yet the Rosicrucians' greatest legacy might be their ambiguity. By design, they left no clear trail, no membership rolls, no headquarters, only whispers and symbols. This elusiveness ensured their ideas would outlive any organization, permeating Freemasonry, modern occultism, and even early scientific institutions. Today, groups claiming Rosicrucian lineage persist from the Golden Dawn to Amorc, each reinterpreting the manifestos through their own lens. Whether Rosencreuz's vault ever existed matters less than what it represents. The unshakable human belief that somewhere, hidden in the intersections of science and spirit, lies a truth potent enough to transform the world. Isaac Newton's name is synonymous with gravity, calculus, and the birth of modern physics, yet tucked away in his private notebooks, written in a hand so cramped it seems afraid of being read, lies a startling secret. For over 3 decades, the man who unraveled the laws of the universe was obsessed with a pursuit most of his peers dismissed as medieval superstition, alchemy. Nearly 1 million words of his cryptic manuscripts survive, filled with strange symbols, coded recipes, and fevered marginalia about the Philosopher's Stone. These weren't the idle doodles of a genius dabbling in mysticism. They were the work of a scholar who believed alchemy held the key to unlocking nature's deepest truths, truths he suspected were hidden in plain sight, waiting to be decoded. Newton's alchemical studies weren't just a hobby, they were a shadow discipline running parallel to his physics. In 1678, while drafting his groundbreaking Principia Mathematica, he also penned The Vegetation of Metals, a treatise claiming metals grew like plants in the Earth's womb, nourished by a cryptic vegetative spirit. To Newton, this wasn't metaphor. He saw gravity and alchemical attraction as 2 sides of the same force, an invisible web connecting everything from falling apples to fermenting elixirs. His famous query, "What is the cause of gravity?" might have been rooted in alchemy's vision of a living, animate universe where matter yearned to unite with like matter. The depth of his devotion becomes clear in his manuscripts. One notebook, dubbed Keen's MS-58, details experiments distilling mercury over 40 nights, watching for the moment it would, quickened with the seed of gold. Another describes a net to capture the green lion, likely a reference to hydrochloric acid's power to dissolve metals into vivid solutions. But the most revealing text is his translation of the Emerald Tablet, where he reworked Hermes Trismegistus's words with the precision of a physicist. As above, so below became a directive to seek mathematical symmetry between celestial and terrestrial forces. Why the secrecy? Alchemy was illegal in Newton's England, punishable by imprisonment for multiplying gold, but the greater risk was to his reputation. When fellow scientist Robert Boyle publicly speculated about transmutation, Newton chastised him in a private letter. To publish such things is to set the world on fire with endless strife. Yet his caution didn't stem from skepticism. Newton believed Boyle had come dangerously close to revealing truths the world wasn't ready to grasp. The real shock lies in how alchemy shaped Newton's legitimate science. His concept of action at a distance, the idea that objects could influence each other without physical contact, mirrored alchemical theories of sympathetic attraction. Even his prism experiment splitting light into colors echoed the alchemist's quest to separate and recombine elemental essences. Historians have even found alchemical symbols scratched into the margins of his drafts for optics, as if he couldn't fully disentangle his physics from his private obsessions. The tragedy, or perhaps the brilliance of Newton's alchemy, is that it never quite fit the mold of his era. He was too late for the Renaissance magus and too early for the Enlightenment rationalist, straddling a line between worlds. When he died in 1727, his heirs dismissed his alchemical papers as embarrassing aberrations, locking them away for centuries. Only in the 1930s did economist John Maynard Keynes, after purchasing the manuscripts at auction, declare that Newton was not the first of the Age of Reason. He was the last of the magicians. What does this mean for our understanding of science? Perhaps that the boundary between rational and occult has always been thinner than we admit. Newton's greatest revelation might be this, that the same mind capable of quantifying the cosmos could also lose itself in the labyrinth of alchemy, not in spite of its genius but because of it. The universe, after all, is under no obligation to conform to our categories, and neither was he. Hieronymus Bosch's The Garden of Earthly Delights is more than a surreal nightmare of temptation and sin. It's an alchemical manuscript painted in vivid color. To the untrained eye, the triptych's bizarre scenes of giant strawberries, translucent pods, and entwined figures seem like pure fantasy. But to an alchemist of the Renaissance, these were textbook symbols, each one a deliberate cipher in a visual language of transformation. The left panel's Eden, where Christ presents Eve to Adam, mirrors the alchemical first matter, the primal union of sulfur masculine, active, and mercury feminine, receptive, that begins the great work. The central panel's chaotic orgy isn't just moral warning. It's the Negredo stage where base desires must be confronted and dissolved before enlightenment. And that eerie right panel, with its hellscape of broken musical instruments and monstrous fauna, that's the mortificatio, the necessary destruction before rebirth. Bosch wasn't just painting damnation, he was charting the soul's alchemical journey. Alchemical motifs hid in plain sight across Renaissance art, often masked as religious or mythological scenes. Take Botticelli's Primavera on the surface, a celebration of spring, but look closer. The three graces, draped in translucent gowns, form a triangle echoing the alchemical trinity of salt, sulfur, and mercury. Mercury himself, the figure on the far left, doesn't just ward off clouds with his caduceus. He's the alchemist's namesake, stirring chaos into order. Even the golden oranges above Venus's head weren't mere decoration. In alchemical texts, citrinitas, the yellowing stage, symbolized the dawning of wisdom, the moment when leaden ignorance began to gild with understanding. The deeper you dig, the clearer it becomes. Artists like Jan van Eyck and Caravaggio weren't just masters of light and shadow. They were initiates in a visual code. Van Eyck's Arnolfini portrait hides alchemical gold in the bride's green gown, symbolizing unripe metal, and the single candle burning in broad daylight, the divine spark in matter. Caravaggio's Narcissus transforms the myth into an allegory of the alchemist's fatal mistake, falling in love with superficial gold instead of pursuing true inner transformation. Even the humble still life held secrets. Those wilting flowers and overturned goblets in Dutch Vanita's paintings, they weren't just reminders of mortality. The blackening rose was the putrefactio, the decay that precedes renewal, the spilled wine, the blood of the green lion, a solvent that could dissolve falsehoods. Why this elaborate subterfuge? Because the Church frowned on alchemy's challenge to divine order. Artists who dared to openly depict the philosopher's stone risked accusations of heresy. So they smuggled their symbolism into biblical narratives, letting those with eyes to see decode the truth. The real masterpiece wasn't the painting itself, but the layered meaning beneath its surface, a test of the viewer's own spiritual refinement. Could you spot the Ouroboros hidden in a saint's halo? Recognize the pelican piercing its breast, a symbol of the alchemist's self-sacrifice in a crucifixion scene. This tradition didn't die with the Renaissance. William Blake's watercolors teem with alchemical imagery. His Ancient of Days isn't just God measuring the cosmos, but the alchemist's divine geometry made manifest. Even Dali, centuries later, laced his surrealist works with references to the magnum opus, from melting clocks time's dissolution in the alchemical bath to ants swarming gold, the corruption of material obsession. The symbols evolved, but the message endured. Art was never just about beauty or moral lessons. It was a mirror, a furnace, a crucible meant to transform not metals, but those who knew how to look. Among the most haunting symbols ripped from alchemy's sacred texts is the black sun, an image that began as a profound emblem of creation's raw void but was twisted into something far darker. To the medieval alchemist, this radiant black orb symbolized the Negrido, the primal chaos from which all matter emerged. It was the unformed night before the cosmos awakened, the Inkai womb where metals died in the furnace only to be reborn as gold. But in the 20th century, this symbol was stolen, its meaning inverted by the Nazis into an icon of occult power and racial supremacy. How did a philosophical concept about transformation become a banner for hatred? And what truths lie buried beneath its corrupted legacy? The original black sun appeared in early alchemical manuscripts like the Aurora Consurgens, a text often attributed to Thomas Aquinas. There it wasn't sinister, it was sacred. The dark disk, often ringed with 12 rays, represented the first matter, the formless essence awaiting the alchemist's touch to give it shape. In illustrations, it floated above landscapes of bones and withered trees, not as a threat but as a promise. Decay was necessary for renewal. The 14th century Rosarium Philosophorum even paired it with a white sun, showing them as twin forces, destruction and creation locked in an eternal dance. Then came the distortion. In the 1930s, Heinrich Himmler's SS architects designed the Wewelsburg Castle as a Nazi ritual site, embedding a black sun mosaic into the floor of its Hall of the Dead. This version warped the symbol's 12 rays into sinister Sig runes, repurposing it as a beacon of Aryan mysticism. The Nazis didn't invent this corruption. They borrowed from earlier occultists like Guido von List, who had already poisoned the well by linking alchemical imagery to racist mythology. Suddenly, a symbol of universal potential became a tool for division, its rays reinterpreted as sun wheels, powering a twisted vision of supremacy. Yet the black sun's alchemical roots refused to die. Modern esoteric traditions, particularly those rooted in Jungian psychology, have worked to reclaim it. Carl Jung saw the negrito as a metaphor for the psyche's shadow, the painful but necessary confrontation with one's darkest self before healing could begin. Contemporary artists echo this, using the black sun in installations about societal reckoning, its darkness not an end but a crucible. Even in popular culture, from comic books to music, the symbol flickers back to its origins, reminding us that the deepest voids often precede the brightest dawns. The Black Sun's journey from laboratory to death camp to therapist's couch exposes a chilling truth. No symbol is immune to misuse, just as no knowledge is safe from those who would weaponize it. But perhaps there's hope in its resilience. Like the alchemists lead awaiting transmutation, the Black Sun's original meaning still waits to be purified, its shadows holding not terror but the raw materials of renewal. Few realize that the humble laboratory beaker, the icon of modern chemistry, owes its existence to the alembic, a glass vessel perfected by alchemists over 1,000 years ago. The line between ancient and modern science isn't just blurred, it's non-existent. Take distillation, that fundamental process separating liquids by boiling points. What began as Jabir ibn Hayyan's quest to isolate the spirit of wine in 8th century Persia is now the backbone of industries from perfumery to petroleum refining. The coiled condenser tubes in today's labs, direct descendants of the serpentine alembics alchemists called dragons, designed to capture fleeting vapors they believed carried the soul of matter. But the connections run deeper than tools. The very ethos of experimentation, testing hypotheses through trial and observation, was forged in alchemical workshops. When Paracelsus insisted, "The dose makes the poison," he wasn't just crafting a pithy maxim. He was articulating the core principle of toxicology, demonstrating that substances could be medicines or poisons depending on quantity. His methodical dosing of patients with mercury and arsenic laid groundwork for modern pharmacology's reliance on precise measurements. Even the concept of peer review has roots in alchemy's clandestine networks, where encrypted letters between adepts functioned as an early form of scientific correspondence, critiquing and building upon each other's findings. Consider the periodic table. At first glance, Mendeleev's masterpiece seems worlds apart from alchemy's 7 planetary metals. But look closer. Gold's resistance to corrosion, symbol O from aurum. The Latin word alchemist used mirrors its solar associations, while Mercury's liquid mobility, Hg for hydrargyrum, or liquid silver, recalls its namesake planet's quicksilver nature. The alchemists' intuitive groupings, metals that tarnished versus those that didn't, substances that vaporized versus those that endured, anticipated modern classifications by valence and reactivity. Perhaps the most profound legacy lies in alchemy's embrace of the unknown. When Newton chased the Philosopher's Stone, he wasn't just seeking gold, he was probing the nature of matter itself, asking questions that would later find answers in nuclear physics. The alchemist's prima materia, the formless first substance, finds eerie resonance in quantum fields, where particles wink in and out of existence. Even their insistence on secrecy, often dismissed as paranoia, mirrors modern intellectual property battles where discoveries are guarded until fully understood. The real transmutation wasn't lead into gold, but alchemy into chemistry. Those flame-scorched manuscripts and cryptic symbols weren't the end point, they were the kindling for a fire that still burns in every lab today. The next time you see a scientist peering into a microscope, remember, they're standing on the shoulders of giants who wore robes, not lab coats, and whose greatest experiment was teaching us how to question everything. Among the most tantalizing mysteries of alchemy are the books that slipped through history's grasp, texts rumored to hold transformative secrets, only to vanish like smoke from a crucible. The legendary Book of Thoth, said to have been penned by the Egyptian god of wisdom himself, tops this ghostly library. Ancient scribes claimed it contained spells to animate statues, command spirits, and even decipher the language of animals. But here's the twist, it wasn't just a scroll of magic. alchemists like Clement of Alexandria believed it held the original blueprint for transmutation, a divine chemistry linking words to the very fabric of matter. The book's fate, buried with its last known keeper, Prince Neferkaptah, who drowned in the Nile after the gods punished him for stealing it, or so claims an Egyptian papyrus from the Ptolemaic era. Later, rumors swirled that it resurfaced in the Library of Alexandria, only to burn with countless others when Caesar's forces set the city ablaze. Then there's the Mirror of Alchemy, attributed to the enigmatic Roger Bacon, the 13th century friar who defied the church to pursue forbidden knowledge. Unlike the Book of Thoth, fragments of this text survive, but its most explosive chapters are conspicuously absent. Bacon's original manuscript allegedly detailed a method to create the Philosopher's Stone using the blood of a red lion and the glistening tears of the moon, phrases modern scholars interpret as coded references to gold chloride and silver nitrate. But the church, wary of its power, supposedly confiscated and destroyed the complete version after Bacon's imprisonment. The Liber Ignium, or Book of Fires, presents an even darker puzzle. Written by the shadowy Marcus Graecus in the 8th century, it reportedly contained recipes for Greek fire, smoke bombs, and even early gunpowder. But its most alarming entry described a burning glass that could focus sunlight into a weapon capable of incinerating entire fleets. Did this text inspire Archimedes' famed death ray? We'll never know. The only surviving copy vanished from the Medici library in the 16th century, possibly stolen by a rival alchemist or silenced by authorities fearing its destructive potential. Perhaps the most tragic loss is the Smaragdine Codex, a sister text to the Emerald Tablet. Arab chroniclers described it as a full-length manuscript expanding on Hermes Trismegistus's cryptic maxims, with detailed diagrams of celestial distillation apparatus and a chapter titled The Animation of Statues. A Moorish alchemist reportedly carried it to Spain during the Umayyad conquest, where it was translated into Latin before the Inquisition seized and burned it as heresy in 1492. What unites these lost books isn't just their disappearance, but the recurring motif of suppression. Whether by flame, theft, or deliberate erasure, their absences form a pattern, one that suggests the most dangerous knowledge wasn't how to transform lead, but how to transform power. And so we're left with whispers, fragments, and the haunting possibility that the greatest alchemical secrets didn't fail to survive, they were made to vanish. Alchemy's fingerprints are everywhere in modern storytelling, though its true essence has often been distilled into flashy magic systems or convenient plot devices. Take Fullmetal Alchemist, where the law of equivalent exchange, central to the show's power mechanics, echoes the alchemist's core belief that transformation demands sacrifice. The Elric brothers' quest to restore their bodies mirrors the magnum opus, with human transmutation standing in for the Philosopher's Stone's perilous promise. Yet the anime's version of alchemy, complete with clapping hands and glowing circles, bears little resemblance to the painstaking laboratory work of historical figures like Jabir ibn Hayyan. It's a romanticized take, but one that captures the ethical dilemmas and existential stakes that fascinated real alchemists. Then there's Harry Potter, where Nicholas Flamel, a genuine historical figure, becomes a whimsical wizard with an immortality-granting stone. The real Flamel never claimed to cheat death. His legend grew from a mix of misinterpreted manuscripts and later fabrications. But Rowling's portrayal taps into something deeper, alchemy's dual role as science and myth. The Sorcerer's Stone, or Philosopher's Stone, in the original British edition isn't just a MacGuffin. It embodies humanity's age-old obsession with conquering decay. Even Hogwarts' curriculum reflects this duality. Potions class, with its precise measurements and transformative brews, mirrors the alchemist's blend of rigor and wonder. Video games, too, have repurposed alchemical symbolism. The Assassin's Creed series weaves the Templars' hunt for Eden artifacts into a pseudo-historical narrative where alchemy serves as precursor to genetic engineering. In The Witcher 3, mutagens and potions channel Paracelsus's idea that toxins in the right doses could enhance rather than kill. These adaptations often exaggerate alchemy's mystical side, but they preserve its spirit of experimentation, the thrill of unlocking nature's hidden rules. Even superhero narratives aren't immune. Marvel's Doctor Strange frames the Ancient One's teachings as interdimensional alchemy, bending the classic concept of transmutation to fit a multiverse. The magic circles Stephen Strange draws in Medea, their distant cousins to the Sigillum Dei, intricate geometric seals medieval alchemists used to protect their work from demonic interference. But perhaps the most poignant modern reinterpretation is Breaking Bad's Walter White, a man literally and figuratively playing with chemical forces beyond his control. His blue meth, dubbed the purest ever seen, becomes his philosopher's stone, a corrupted version of alchemy's quest for perfection. Like the adepts of old, Walter seeks transcendence through chemistry, only to find that the greatest transformation isn't of matter but of self. These pop culture alchemies, for all their inaccuracies, reveal something vital. The old masters' dreams still resonate because they speak to universal longings. Whether it's the hope to mend what's broken, the hunger for knowledge, or the terror of playing God, the stories we tell about alchemy are, in the end, stories about ourselves. And that's the real transmutation, taking leaden history and spinning it into narrative gold. The suppression of alchemy didn't happen overnight. It was a slow, deliberate unraveling, fueled by fear, power struggles, and the dawn of a new intellectual era. One of the earliest blows came from the medieval church, which saw alchemy's promise of transmutation as a direct challenge to divine order. If humans could create gold or conquer death, what need had they for God's grace? In 1314, Pope John XXII issued a papal bull titled Spondent Quas non exhibent, condemning alchemists as frauds and heretics. The punishment for those caught practicing their art, excommunication, and in some cases public burning. Yet the irony was thick. While the church denounced alchemy publicly, its own monasteries often housed clandestine laboratories. Monks like Basil Valentine secretly penned treatises on metallic transformations, disguising their work as religious allegory to avoid the pyre. Secular rulers were no less hypocritical. Kings and emperors oscillated between funding alchemists and imprisoning them. Take England's King Henry IV, who in 1404 banned the multiplication of gold, not because he disbelieved in transmutation, but because he feared counterfeiters would destabilize the economy. Alchemy's dual reputation as both genius and fraud made it a political pawn. The Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II famously patronized alchemists like John Dee and Edward Kelly, yet when their promised gold failed to materialize, he left them to rot in prison. The message was clear: alchemy was welcome only when it served power and disposable when it didn't. The rise of empirical science in the 17th century delivered the final blow, not through persecution but through ridicule. Figures like Robert Boyle and later Antoine Lavoisier dismissed alchemy as unscientific, replacing its symbolic language with quantitative precision. The Royal Society of London, founded in 1660, excluded alchemists from its ranks, branding their work as superstition. Even the word chemistry was coined to distance the new discipline from its disreputable ancestor. The irony: many early chemists, including Boyle himself, dabbled in alchemy in private. Isaac Newton's secret manuscripts reveal decades spent decoding alchemical texts, yet publicly, he championed the mechanical universe, a world where mystery had no place. But the most insidious suppression wasn't from flames or laws, it was from neglect. As libraries modernized, alchemical manuscripts were relegated to back shelves or discarded as obsolete. The Bibliotheca Chemica Curiosa, a massive alchemical compendium, was literally cut apart and sold page by page to collectors. By the 19th century, alchemy had been reduced to a footnote in the history of science, its profound insights buried under layers of caricature. Yet the story doesn't end there. The very forces that sought to erase alchemy also preserved it. The Church's archives, meant to catalogue heresy, inadvertently saved banned texts. The same Royal Society that mocked alchemy later employed scholars who rediscovered its value. Even the Nazis' obsession with occult symbolism, while distorting alchemical imagery, inadvertently brought forgotten symbols back into the light. The suppression of alchemy, then, is a tale not of eradication, but of resilience, a reminder that knowledge, no matter how fiercely opposed, has a way of transmuting itself into new forms, waiting for the right moment to re-emerge. Alchemy was never just about turning lead into gold. It was a grand experiment in understanding the universe itself. These 25 lost wisdoms reveal a discipline that danced on the razor's edge between magic and science, where mercury symbolized both a volatile metal and the fluidity of the human spirit, where furnaces were altars and chemical reactions held cosmic meaning. The Philosopher's Stone wasn't merely a recipe for wealth, it was a metaphor for enlightenment. The elixir of life didn't promise endless years so much as it hinted at the body's hidden potential. And those cryptic symbols, they weren't just secret codes, they were blueprints for a way of seeing the world where matter and meaning were inseparable. From Egypt's temple laboratories to Newton's clandestine notes, alchemy bridged the seen and unseen. It gave us the alembic, the foundation of modern chemistry, while preserving the idea that transformation begins within. It dared to ask questions we're still grappling with today. Can consciousness alter matter? Are there patterns linking the stars to the cells in our bodies? The alchemists may have worked with primitive tools, but their vision was anything but small. They saw the universe as a living, breathing puzzle, one where every experiment, whether in a flask or the depths of the soul, was a step toward unlocking its mysteries. So what do you think? If alchemy's greatest secrets were hidden in plain sight all along, what other forgotten truths might be waiting just beneath the surface of history? Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's keep the quest for knowledge alive. After all, the real Philosopher's Stone wasn't a physical object, it was curiosity itself, and that's something we can all cultivate.